The guards dragged Rhea Vance through the prison ship like she was already dead. Her boots scraped against polished metal floors that reflected nothing but cold light. Behind her back, electromagnetic cuffs hummed with the kind of technology that made resistance a fantasy. She had stopped counting the days since her trial. 3 months? 4? Time moved differently when you were labeled a traitor for refusing orders that conflicted with your oath to heal. The corridor opened into a viewing platform where off-duty officers gathered with drinks that cost more than her annual salary used to be. They watched through reinforced glass as other prisoners shuffled through their routines below. One guard pressed his palm against a biometric scanner. The wall ahead split open to reveal a hatch covered in warning symbols that glowed in angry red. Rhea felt her stomach drop. She had heard whispers about this place. The vault. The pit. The place where problems disappeared and became cautionary tales. Her escort commander, a woman with ice for eyes and paperwork for a soul, leaned close enough for Rhea to smell recycled air on her breath. "You should have accepted the memory wipe," the commander said. "Would have been cleaner than this." Before Rhea could respond, hands shoved her forward. She fell into darkness that seemed to have weight. The impact knocked the air from her lungs and sent stars dancing across her vision. Above her, the hatch sealed with the finality of a coffin lid. Magnetic locks engaged with 3 precise clicks. Then came the silence that only exists in places built to contain nightmares. Rhea lay still and focused on breathing. 4 counts in. Hold for 2. 6 counts out. Her medical training kicked in before panic could take root. She did a mental inventory. Ribs intact. Spine functional. Head throbbing but clear. The cuffs had loosened slightly from the fall. She rolled onto her side and felt something hard press against her hip. The emergency medical scanner they had missed during processing. It was the size of a lipstick tube, and just as easy to overlook. She activated it. Pale blue light bloomed in her palm and pushed back the darkness by inches. The chamber was larger than she expected. Smooth walls curved upward into shadows her small light could not reach. The floor bore scratches that formed patterns. Deep gouges that spoke of claws and fury and time spent learning the exact dimensions of a cage. A sound emerged from the far side of the chamber. Not a growl. Something softer. Like wind moving through a canyon or a song that had forgotten its words. Rhea swept her light toward the noise and her breath caught. The creature was enormous. In the scanner's glow, she saw scales that shifted between colors she had no names for. They reminded her of oil on water, or the way certain minerals caught sunlight on her home planet. The body was serpentine, but supported by 4 legs that bent at angles both familiar and wrong. Wings folded against its sides like collapsed sails. The head was angular and elegant, with a crown of horn like protrusions that curved back gracefully. But it was the eyes that stopped Rhea's heart. They were huge and luminous, holding depths that suggested intelligence rather than instinct. They watched her with an expression she recognized from years of working in trauma. Wards, pain, exhaustion, a weariness that came from being treated as a thing rather than a being. Rhea had seen files about alien species kept in containment. She knew the official classifications: hostile, dangerous, non-sentient, property of the Military Research Division. She also knew how often those labels were applied to justify cruelty. The creature shifted its weight. Rhea noticed the limp immediately. The right rear leg moved carefully, as if even small movements cost something precious. Her medical instincts flared. She swept the scanner along the visible body and saw infection markers light up in warning colors. Parasites clustered near joints. Old wounds that had healed incorrectly. Signs of prolonged stress that pushed biology to its breaking point. Above them, through the viewing glass, Voices made bets. How long would the prisoner survive? Would there be screaming? One voice suggested 5 minutes. Another countered with 2. They spoke about potential death like it was a sporting event. Rhea felt anger burn away the last of her fear. She rose slowly to her feet. The creature tracked her movement, but did not advance. Its massive head tilted slightly to one side in what might have been curiosity. Rhea took one careful step forward, then another. She kept her hands visible and her movements smooth. The scanner cast strange shadows that danced between them. "My name is Rhea Vance," she said quietly. Her voice felt too small for the space, but she continued anyway. "I was a medic before they decided I was a problem. I took an oath to help anything that bleeds and hurts. That includes you." The creature blinked slowly. Those luminous eyes reflected her light. Back at her, and something passed between them that had no need for. Language, recognition, understanding, acknowledgement that both of them had been thrown away by systems that saw them as disposable. Rhea checked the scanner readings again. She had limited medical supplies. A small emergency kit in her boot that security had somehow missed. Basic trauma response training and years of making impossible decisions with insufficient resources. It would have to be enough. She took another step closer. The creature's breathing slowed from the rapid pattern of alarm to something more measured, testing, deciding whether this small human represented threat or possibility. Rhea extended one hand, palm up, in the universal gesture of offering rather than taking. "Let me help you," she whispered. "Please." The chamber held its breath. Above them, someone laughed. Below them, in the darkness that smelled of old pain and older loneliness, 2 prisoners decided to trust each other. The creature lowered its enormous head until Rhea could feel the heat radiating from scales that shimmered like star fire. Its eyes closed halfway in what might have been the beginning of acceptance. Rhea placed her hand gently on the bridge of that alien nose and felt a vibration run through both of them like electricity finding ground. Neither of them knew yet that this moment would become the first page of a story that would shake the foundations of everything humanity thought it knew about love, loyalty, and the space between species. They only knew that for the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt completely alone. The scanner beeped softly. Rhea looked at the readouts showing infection and injury and began planning her approach. She had survived worse odds. They both had. And sometimes, she thought as she opened her emergency kit, survival was just another word for rebellion. The first hour taught Rhea that tenderness could exist anywhere if someone was brave enough to offer it. She worked carefully, using the limited supplies from her emergency kit to clean the worst of the infected wounds. The creature, whom she had started calling Solenne, after the way the light played across those shimmering scales like a solemn prayer, remained impossibly still during the process. Every touch was a negotiation. Rhea would pause before each movement, waiting for the slight shift in breathing that meant permission granted. She used torn strips from her uniform as makeshift bandages, soaking them in the sterile solution from her kit. The parasites proved stubborn. Their roots dug deep into sensitive flesh. She removed what she could without causing more harm, her hands steady despite the trembling in her chest. Solenne made sounds that Rhea began to catalog like a new language. A low rumble meant comfort. A higher pitch suggested discomfort, but tolerance. A soft chirping noise that seemed to come from somewhere deep in that massive chest meant something Rhea interpreted as gratitude. She responded with her own vocabulary of gentle words and careful movements. The viewing gallery above had grown quieter. Rhea caught glimpses of faces pressed against the glass, confusion replacing the earlier entertainment. This was not the show they had paid to see. No violence, no screaming, just a woman treating an alien creature with the same dignity she would offer any patient. Hours became something fluid. Rhea lost track of time in the rhythm of care and response. She discovered that Solenne's scales were warm to the touch, holding heat like sun-baked stones. The wings, when carefully examined, showed delicate membrane structures that reminded her of stained glass. Beautiful and fragile, and completely impractical for the harsh containment they had endured. She found scars that told stories. Burn marks from energy weapons. Compression injuries from restraints applied too tightly for too long. Evidence of procedures performed without anesthesia. Rhea felt rage build in her throat, but swallowed it down. Anger could wait. Right now, healing was the only revolution that mattered. Solenne watched her work with those impossibly expressive eyes. Sometimes they would close completely, a sign of trust that made Rhea's heart ache. Other times they tracked every movement with an intensity that felt like being studied at a molecular level. Rhea wondered what Solenne saw. A human who had also been discarded? A temporary kindness in an ocean of cruelty? Or something else entirely? As Rhea cleaned a particularly nasty wound along Solenne's shoulder, she began to talk. Not medical instructions or soothing platitudes, but real words from a real person who had nothing left to lose by being honest. They court-martialed me for refusing to harvest organs from wounded prisoners, she said quietly. The official term was enemy combatants, but that is just language designed to make murder feel cleaner. They were people, scared and hurt and deserving of care, not dissection. So I said no. Funny how one word can end everything you thought you were. Solenne's rumble deepened. Those massive eyes blinked slowly. Rhea felt understood in a way that transcended vocabulary. She continued working, her hands finding rhythm in the familiar motions of wound care. I had a partner once, Rhea continued, surprised at her own need to fill the silence with truth. Before the military, before everything became about borders and species, and who gets to decide what counts as sentient. Her name was Joelle. She had this laugh that could make you believe the universe had a sense of humor. We talked about opening a clinic together on one of the colony worlds. Somewhere far from politics and war. Somewhere we could just help people without needing permission from committees who had never held a scalpel. The memory tasted bittersweet. Joelle had left when Rhea's principles started threatening her career. Some love could not survive the weight of choosing between comfort and conscience. Rhea did not blame her. She had learned that loneliness was just the price of refusing to compromise the things that made her human. Solenne shifted position, bringing her head closer to Rhea. The movement was deliberate and slow, giving Rhea every opportunity to retreat. Instead, she reached up and placed both hands on either side of that elegant skull. The scales felt like warm silk under her palms. She could feel the pulse of blood beneath the surface, steady and strong, alive in all the ways that mattered. You understand, don't you? Rhea whispered. What it costs to be different. To refuse what they demand of you. To choose integrity over safety. Solenne's eyes closed fully. A sound emerged that was neither rumble nor chirp, but something entirely new. It wrapped around Rhea like a physical embrace, resonating in her bones and blood. She felt tears she had not known she was holding slip down her cheeks. When had she last cried? When had she last allowed herself the luxury of feeling anything beyond survival? The creature's neck curved, bringing their faces close enough that Rhea could see her reflection in those luminous eyes. She saw herself transformed by alien perspective. Not a prisoner, not a medic, not a woman defined by her failures or her refusals. Just Rhea, whole and seen and somehow less alone than she had been in years. I think I'm falling for you, Rhea said, and the words felt both absurd and absolutely true. I don't know what that means or how it's possible, but I feel it. Here. She pressed one hand to her chest. Like something fundamental is shifting. Like I'm remembering how to be more than just surviving. Solenne's response was to press her forehead gently against Rhea's. The contact sent warmth flooding through Rhea's entire body. She felt a presence in her mind, not invasive but inviting. Images flickered behind her closed eyelids. A world of violet skies and silver forests. A community of beings like Solenne, moving through landscapes that defied human understanding. Beauty and belonging, and the crushing loneliness of being torn from everything familiar. Rhea gasped. "You're telepathic." The images continued. She saw Solenne's capture. The fear and confusion. The pain of experimentation. The slow death of hope as days became months, became years. The assumption that cruelty was the only constant in existence. And then a new image. Rhea's face illuminated by scanner light. Gentle hands offering care instead of harm. The shocking realization that kindness could still exist. Tears fell freely now. Rhea wrapped her arms around Solenne's massive neck as much as she could reach and held on. Above them, the viewing gallery had emptied. The entertainment value had been replaced by something that made observers uncomfortable. Intimacy. Connection. The kind that could not be classified or controlled. "We have to get out of here," Rhea said into scales that smelled like ozone and starlight. "Both of us together." Solenne pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Intelligence blazed there, sharp and calculating. The limp was better now, the infections beginning to respond to treatment. But escape from a maximum security facility designed to contain beings far stronger than either of them. That was a fantasy built on desperation and hope. Unless Rhea thought about the security protocols. The way the guards had grown lazy with routine. The emergency overrides built into every containment system because even prisons needed fail-safes. The electromagnetic cuffs that had loosened from the fall. She looked at her hands and then at the creature who had somehow become the most important being in her universe. "I have an idea," Rhea said. "It's dangerous. Probably impossible. Definitely going to get us both killed if it fails." Solenne's rumble sounded like laughter. Those eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief or might have been the first stirring of hope in a very long time. She pressed her nose to Rhea's palm in what was becoming their gesture of agreement and trust. Rhea smiled for the first time since her arrest. It felt strange on her face, like muscles remembering a purpose they had almost forgotten. She stood and assessed their prison with new eyes. Not a tomb. A puzzle. And she had always been good at solving puzzles when the stakes were high enough. She looked up at the sealed hatch and the security systems that thought they were impenetrable. Then she looked at Solenne, who watched her with absolute faith. Between them, in the space where species divided and love somehow bridged, something impossible began to take shape. A plan. An escape. A future neither of them had dared to imagine. The plan required perfect timing and a willingness to gamble. Everything on a single moment. Rhea spent hours mapping the security cycle by counting the intervals between status checks. Every 6 hours, a guard would peer through the viewing window and confirm that both prisoner and creature remained contained. The shift change happened at 0600 station time. That was when attention wavered and protocols got sloppy. Rhea worked with what she had. The electromagnetic cuffs were designed to tighten with stress, but loosen when the biometric signature read as calm. She spent 3 hours practicing meditation breathing, forcing her heart rate down until the cuffs relaxed enough for her to slip one hand free. The scanner could be reprogrammed. Its medical functions included emergency broadcast capability for calling help to trauma sites. If she could access the right frequency, she could trigger a containment breach alarm. Solenne understood the plan through that telepathic connection that had grown stronger with each passing hour. Images passed between them with increasing clarity. Rhea saw through Solenne's memories, how she had been transported to this facility. The cargo bay, the loading mechanisms, the weak points in the infrastructure where civilian design met military upgrades and left gaps in coverage. They practiced coordination in the hours before dawn. Solenne would strike the north wall at a specific angle, creating a stress fracture that would look like structural failure rather than escape attempt. Rhea would trigger the alarm, creating confusion about where the actual breach occurred. In the chaos, they would have maybe 90 seconds to reach the cargo bay before bulkheads sealed, 90 seconds to cover half a kilometer through hostile territory. Impossible odds. But Rhea had stopped believing in impossible the moment she had chosen compassion over cruelty in a cell designed for death. She pressed her forehead to Solenne's one final time before they began. The telepathic connection opened fully, and Rhea felt emotions that had no human. Translation, devotion, determination, something that tasted like love but carried flavors human language had never developed words for. The kind of feeling that existed between souls who recognized each other across the vast distance between species and circumstances. Ready? Rhea whispered. Solenne's rumble resonated through the chamber. Ready. Rhea activated the scanner and began the sequence to override its safety protocols. Warning messages flashed across the tiny screen. Unauthorized access. Medical emergency beacon activation requires authorization. She ignored them all and keyed in the trauma code that would broadcast on every frequency the scanner could reach. Somewhere in the facility, alarms began to scream. Solenne moved like lightning wrapped in grace. Her body coiled and then released, driving her shoulder into the north wall with calculated precision. Metal shrieked. Structural supports groaned. The impact sent vibrations through the entire chamber that felt like an earthquake localized to their prison. Hairline fractures spider webbed across the reinforced plating. Rhea was already at the hatch, using the confusion to access the emergency release. Her freed hand worked quickly, muscle memory from years of emergency procedures guiding her fingers. The locks disengaged with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The hatch swung open just as guards began pouring into the corridor beyond. They froze at the sight of Solenne emerging from the cell. All that mass and power and barely contained fury flowing into a space designed for humans. One guard reached for his weapon. Solenne's tail swept his legs out from under him before he could draw. Another tried to trigger the containment field. Rhea tackled her, both women hitting the floor hard. "I'm sorry," Rhea gasped as she struck the pressure point that would induce temporary unconsciousness. "I'm so sorry." Solenne's wings swept forward, creating a barrier between Rhea and 3 more guards who had rallied their courage. The membrane was tougher than it looked. Energy weapon fire splashed against it and dissipated. Rhea scrambled to her feet and ran, trusting Solenne to follow. The corridor became a blur of emergency lighting and shouting voices. Bulkheads began to descend, heavy sheets of reinforced metal designed to segment the station in case of breach. Rhea slid under one with centimeters to spare. Solenne's more massive body had to twist and compress, pushing through the narrowing gap with seconds before it sealed. They burst into the cargo bay just as the main breach alarm achieved full volume. The space was cavernous and filled with transport pods in various states of loading. Rhea spotted their target immediately. A civilian transport scheduled for departure in 20 minutes. The loading ramp was still extended. The crew had abandoned their posts to investigate the alarms. "There," Rhea pointed. They ran together across the open bay. Energy weapons fire tracked them from elevated positions. Solenne's wings spread, catching air and lifting them both in a short controlled glide that covered ground faster than running. They hit the ramp together and scrambled into the transport's hold. Rhea sealed the outer door and made her way to the cockpit. She had basic pilot training from her military service. Enough to know which controls meant launch and which meant catastrophic failure. She initiated the emergency departure sequence, overriding every safety protocol with the desperation of someone who knew hesitation meant capture. The transport shuddered. Docking clamps released with metallic clangs that sounded like freedom. Through the viewports, Rhea saw the station beginning to recede. Guards poured into the bay too late. A few shots pinged harmlessly off the transport's shields. Then they were clear. The transport's autopilot engaged, following its predetermined course to a mining colony 3 systems away. Rhea collapsed into the pilot's seat and started laughing. The sound was half hysteria and half genuine joy. They had done it. Against all logic and probability, they had actually escaped. Solenne squeezed into the cockpit, her body filling the available space with warm scales and gentle rumbling. She pressed her face against Rhea's shoulder in their private gesture of connection. Through the telepathic bond, Rhea felt Solenne's overwhelming relief mixed with disbelief. Freedom, real freedom. The concept was so foreign, it felt like learning to breathe a new atmosphere. "We made it," Rhea said, reaching up to stroke the elegant curve of Solenne's jaw. "We actually made it." But even as she said the words, reality began to assert itself. They were fugitives now, wanted by military authorities across multiple systems. The transport would be tracked. Their faces, or at least Rhea's face, and Solenne's biometric signature, would be distributed to every checkpoint and monitoring station in human-controlled space. "We can't go to any colony world," Rhea said, thinking aloud. "They will be watching for us everywhere. We need somewhere off the grid, somewhere humans don't control." Images bloomed in her mind. Solenne's homeworld, the violet skies and silver forests, a place where beings like her lived free from human interference. It was deep in uncharted space, far beyond the boundaries of explored territory. The journey would be dangerous. The transport was not designed for such long-range travel. They would need supplies, fuel, and luck in quantities that seemed impossible. But impossible had stopped being a barrier the moment Rhea had chosen to extend kindness in a cell designed for cruelty. "Show me the way," Rhea whispered. "Take us home." Solenne's purr deepened. Through their connection, coordinates began to form. Not numbers and vectors that human navigation systems would recognize, but something more intuitive. A sense of direction that transcended technology. Rhea input what she could into the autopilot, adjusting their course away from known space and toward the vast unknown. She stood and turned to fully embrace Solenne. Her arms could barely reach around that powerful neck, but she held on anyway. Solenne's wings wrapped around her in return, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. In that moment, pressed against alien scales that felt like home, Rhea understood something profound. Love was not about similarity. It was about recognition. Two souls seeing each other clearly across any distance and choosing connection over isolation. Species did not matter. Labels did not matter. What mattered was this: two beings who had survived their own destruction, deciding to build something new together. "I love you," Rhea said, and the words felt like the truest thing she had ever spoken. Solenne's response came not in words, but in feeling. A wave of emotion that washed through Rhea with the force of a tidal wave. Devotion absolute and unconditional. Gratitude for the compassion that had saved her life. Joy at no longer being alone. And yes, love. A love that transcended vocabulary and found expression in the simple fact of choosing to be together against a universe that said it was wrong. They stayed that way as the transport carried them deeper into uncharted space. Behind them, humanity's empire continued its expansion, blind to the revolution beginning at its edges. A revolution that said love could exist anywhere. That kindness mattered more than classification. That two beings from different worlds could look at each other and see not alien, but beloved. The viewports showed stars in unfamiliar configurations. They were leaving everything known behind and venturing into possibility. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was exactly what both of them needed. Rhea kissed the space between Solenne's eyes, feeling scales warm under her lips. "Let's go home," she said. Together. And the transport carried them forward, two refugees from cruelty, two survivors who had found each other in the darkest place, now flying toward hope with nothing but love to guide them and everything to discover along the way. The end was really just the beginning.